Hey everyone, I sit down with the one, the only DJ Demers in today's episode of Hear Me Out. I am so stoked for you to hear all about his show one more time, what it's like to parent with hearing loss, and so much more. So let's get into it. Hi DJ, thank you so much for joining me on an episode of Hear Me Out. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, yes. So I want to start off by first congratulating you on your season one of One More Time. In my honest opinion, it is the comedy show we have been missing for so long, especially in Canadian television, but just television in general, because it is so funny.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we tried to make it as funny as possible, so I appreciate you saying that. Tried to pack as many jokes as we could in there.
Yeah, the one-liners, honestly, and the banter between the characters, like how first let's start with like how did you get the show greenlit? Because I can imagine there was a lot of hoops you had to go through.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I kept being told throughout the process that like this was very unusual how quickly it was all moving. So there were a lot of hoops to jump through, but they were all jumped through in very quick order. I wrote it and then um well, when I first wrote it, it took like a year for a production company to want to let work with me on it. So I was waiting around for that. And then when the company finally, when Counterfeit Pictures, a great production company in Toronto, when they finally said, we want to do something with it, they said, we'll pitch it around to a bunch of different networks. And they said, just so you know, this process takes time. And the first network we pitched it to is CBC. And I think maybe 2 days later, they were like, we love it. We want to make it. So we didn't even end up talking to any other broadcasters. So, and then a couple months after that, we were writing. And then a few months after that, we were filming. So, yeah, once CBC said they liked it, we were kind of off to the races. It was pretty sweet.
Wow, that is really fast though. That's awesome because yeah, that just seems like chaotic almost how quickly that happened because you only had to pitch to one person or one network.
Yeah, it's true. It was, yeah. And then even once they said they liked it, the whole time you're waiting for some tragedy to happen where they say, oh, actually, we can't make it, or this happened or that happened. But yeah, it just kept going smoothly. So,
That's
yeah, it was pretty cool. Like to to write a show and then in your head after you write it, you go, nothing will probably happen from this, but at the very least, I got some good writing, and you don't ever want to get your hopes up. So then for CBC to actually say, no, we want to make this, you're like, what? You do? Okay.
now I want to talk a little bit about the casting because the dynamic between the characters, I honestly don't think I've laughed harder with like Kieran's one-liners or Wayne's one-liners. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is too much to handle. Or like the dynamic between Chris and Cynthia that you don't expect, or like you and Carlito. Like, how was it casting for this show?
It was so fun. That was one of the most fun parts of the process. Just, I wrote the pilot on my own, and then we ended up assembling a writing team. So you write the whole season with like seven of you, seven or eight of us. And so you're writing all these characters, but you don't actually know who's playing them yet. It's like a blank slate. So then to actually write these words and then start to watch people film their auditions and say the words you wrote, and then you're trying to figure out like, is that what we envisioned? Is that who we envisioned when we wrote this character? But then sometimes it's not what you envisioned, but you're like, I actually like this
Right.
better. Or sometimes it's like exactly what you envisioned, and you're like, yeah, it's got to be them. So, so many talented actors in Canada to choose from. So it was tough too. Sometimes you'd have two characters or two actors that like it came down to the wire, and you're trying to figure out who it should be. But for the most part, like everybody we picked, um, we kind of had that feeling right when we watched the audition, like it's them. And then Saren, who plays Kieran, he actually, the casting agency found him at some like high school talent show, and because we were having a hard time finding our Kieran, and they were like, "This is the guy," and we're like, "Okay, I don't know why you're so confident saying that, but we'll watch it." And then we watched it, and he was just so delightfully like awkward and teenaged in a real authentic way that yeah, we were like, they were absolutely right. He's perfect. So Saren was a great find.
It's so funny. Like, and I mean, not to boost your ego even more, but when my husband and I sat down for the first episode, we're always trying to find a show that we can both watch. And after the first episode, we're like, this is it. Okay, we need to make sure, like, when our daughter goes down, when can we pull it up on the app to watch this? Because we have both never laughed so hard or found a show that we're both like, yes, this is our show.
Ah,
So,
that's great to hear. Thank you. How old's your daughter?
1.5.
Ah, I got a 2-year-old son.
Yes, it's a lot, kid. We'll get into the parenting a little bit later, but it's a whole other dynamic going on there.
Yeah, one and
Uh,
a half. Yeah, for sure.
Totally. I do want to thank you for your comedy because I was diagnosed with hearing loss right when you were on America's Got Talent, and it really
Oh,
became part
really?
of me. So I was diagnosed at 25. I'm now 33. I still think of myself as young, but I don't know if 30s are young anymore.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, your whole comedy has really helped me grieve and kind of process my hearing loss journey. So I'm curious if your hearing loss, like sharing it in the comedic way, is therapeutic for yourself, or how do you navigate that?
A good question. Well, yeah, our journeys are very different, right? You were diagnosed at 25, so you kind of had to grieve the hearing person that you were before and come to terms with, the new life that you were going to have to live. So I empathize with that obviously more than just a hearing person would, because I know what it's like to have hearing loss, but I've had it since I was so young that I didn't have to necessarily go through that process. Or if I did, I was so young I don't remember it, but I've just worn hearing aids since I can remember. So for me, it's like almost a benefit that I don't know any other world. So I kind of, when my brain was still young and nimble, it just came to terms with the fact that this is our reality, and then you move on. There were struggles, of course, but you know, learning at 25, or people learning at 60 even, like you meet so many, I meet so many older people, 60 or 70 years old, who they don't want to wear hearing aids. They've been told by a doctor they should, and they know it'll make their life better, but they're like, I just don't want to do it, which is such an interesting uh human thing to do. Like I'm not even judging it, because I understand we all have vanity and pride, and you're like, you have to confront some weird element of your mortality because of your hearing loss. So I it's an interesting journey that everybody goes on with their hearing loss. Like 25, I feel that's almost the most unusual I could imagine, because you don't hear about that very often. You hear about babies, parents learning their children are deaf or hard of hearing, or people with advanced age. But I'd like to hear more about what that was like at 25.
Yeah, it was weird, to be quite honest, because I honestly I went to my doctor being like, oh, I have water stuck in my ear. What can you do to help me? And they're like, you know what? I think you need to see an ENT. And I was like, okay, that appointment. So you need a hearing aid. I was like, what? Like it was only on one side, but now I'm bilateral. And it was a lot of emotions in one moment that I don't even know if I processed anything they said to me after that point when they said you need a hearing aid. But since then, I've just been on this journey to advocate, to share my experience, to open up this space to other people with hearing loss. That's why I started this interview series, because I
Mm-hmm.
want to, end the stigma as much as I can, because I do have a somewhat unique experience getting hearing loss later in life. And so, yeah, I try to have fun with it. My whole page is just super awkward, weird reels about, the game show aspect of your hearing test, or just being able to turn off my husband when he decides to play guitar that he's self-taught. So it's a blessing in disguise almost that I can just unplug. But yeah, it's really interesting getting to talk to all different people of ages and backgrounds about their hearing loss. And yeah, I'm just trying to do what I can now with the life that I've been given. So
That's really cool. Yeah, that's really interesting, because a lot of people, I don't think that would be their instinct to become an advocate. They would maybe go the other direction and say, let's see how good I can be at playing a hearing character, even though I'm now a hard of hearing character. Like, and I've been that way in my life too. Like, especially when I was a kid and I had more elements of shame and vanity around it. Like I would pretend. I would even though I wasn't fooling anybody, I would still like I had to change my hearing aids out when I played hockey. They'd go dead from sweating. And so I would go to the bench and I would like change them. My coach would have a backup set and like a dry aid kit. But I would go to like the end of the bench and like do it as like covertly as possible. But it's like everybody knows I wear hearing aid, but for me that felt like, oh, nobody knows. I'm still hearing. So I could imagine at 25 going that route of being like, oh, especially as a woman or anybody with long hair, you go, I can cover it up with my hair. Nobody needs to know. So for you to kind of go the opposite way and say, no, let me kind of jump into this and be an advocate, I think that's very commendable.
You. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it also helped that I had a lot of support, which I know a lot of people don't. Like my family and friends were immediately like, we got this, like what can we do to help you? But I'm learning very quickly from other people that's not the case. So I try to tread lightly because I do have a unique experience with it. But again, I do what I can to help with the community that I'm now a part of. So yeah.
That's such a great point you bring up, by the way, because that's something I've learned along the way too, is how valuable it was, how important it was that I had a good support system as well. Because now I've worked with charities. There's a charity here in LA called No Limits for Deaf Children that I've worked with a lot. And yeah, you see, and they've told me a lot of stories about the difference between a kid who comes in with parents who are like, let's tackle this problem, let's figure it out and give you the best life possible, and then parents who don't acknowledge it or stigmatize it, or it's really night and day between how those kids, the shot they get at overcoming this.
Totally. And I think that's why your show one more time is so important because it highlights all of this with which I think a lot of people don't know or aren't aware of in the hearing loss world. And you also touch on other disabilities too in a couple of your episodes, which are equally funny. And I hope everyone watching downloads the CBC Gem app and watches it because I can't speak highly enough of this show.
Thank
But
you.
I think that's so important that you took your experience and made the show because I think that will help a lot of people come to the realization that hearing loss isn't that bad. It has its ups and downs, but don't be afraid of it.
And it's getting easier and easier with technology nowadays. So yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, like you said, there's still challenges, but like on the whole, it's never been easier to be hard of hearing.
Yeah, so true. So
Yeah.
true. Now, on a slightly like different serious note, how has being a parent been? It has its own struggles, but then hearing loss adds another element of struggle. So how has that been?
Well, I would actually love to know what's your hearing loss without your hearing aids?
Oh, I'm moderate to severe. So if I'm in a small room, I can like hear a little bit, but I wouldn't necessarily be able to hold up like a perfect conversation, but I could, based on lips and facial expressions, I could fake it through.
Okay. I'm just curious because for me, like if my son wakes up in the middle of the night crying, I don't hear it if I have my hearing aids out. But
Oh,
my wife is usually the one he wants anyway. And by usually I mean always. So she wakes up with them and she gives him what he needs. But I was just curious as a mom being hard of hearing, are you like sleeping with one hearing aid in, or what's your tactic?
so the first 4 months I slept with my hearing aids in, but we co-sleep actually. So I can sleep without my hearing aids and then feel her if she wakes up. So that's the route we went. Super great for my husband. He gets the bed to himself, and I share a
Me
bed with
too.
our daughter. Being hearing impaired, that is the route that made the most sense for me because sleeping with my hearing aids in was not fun.
No, it's terrible. By the way, my wife and my son co-sleep as well, so I have my own bed. So, I know there's some people say not to do it, whatever, like it's the best thing, and it's the best
Sleep,
thing
that's
for
all.
everybody. But my son will come into my room and wake me up and just give me my hearing aids. That's how he wakes me up every morning. So it's the most adorable thing in the world. Like he knows that I can't hear without them, and watching him come to that realization probably about 6 months ago, I would say, around your daughter's age, was when I first saw him like like he knew about the hearing aid before that, but like the real connection of like, you're not gonna get anything I'm saying, so let's speed this up.
That's so
Here you
funny.
go. Um, so yeah, it's been pretty cool watching that evolution. Like even, he's got a higher voice because kid just have a higher pitched voice.
Yeah.
So I don't hear him as well as my wife does. And then he's got, a bunch of gobbledygook that I can decipher what some of the words mean, but
Right.
especially if it's a new word, like let's say my wife and him were talking the day before and they noticed some flower. And so he says the flower a certain way, but I wasn't part of that conversation. So now he's coming at me saying, blah, blah, and he's trying to say orchid. And he's saying blah, blah, like 5 times in a row, looking at me like, come on, dude, I'm saying orchid here. And I'm like, that's definitely not what you're saying. But he is like, I feel like he knows I'm hard of hearing. Like he's watching me and I can see he's like kind of getting frustrated, but kind of empathetic. Like I'm watching him process my difficulties. And it's really interesting. I'm just curious to see how the whole road goes, like what it's going to be like for him. I'm sure there's going to be moments of frustration for him. I try to teach him patience and but yeah, he's got a hard of hearing dad, which is a unique experience that's going to have some impact on him, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's okay if you don't want to answer this, but like, do you have to get his hearing checked regularly to make sure, like, is what the hearing you have genetic at all in any way, or?
It's very interesting. He has no hearing issues, and they don't really know if mine's genetic. They don't think,
Okay.
but my mom, she had hearing her whole life and then lost her left ear when she was around 35. She lost like half her hearing in her left ear, and then it's consistently gone down to like nothing since then. And then about 10 years ago, her right ear started going on her too. And her dad had hearing issues his whole life as well. So I feel like there might be genetics involved, but they've told us when he was born, they said his hearing was perfect and no reason to think it would change. So what about, is yours a genetic condition? Is that what happened to you?
So, yeah, I have otosclerosis, which is an abnormal bone growth in my ear. There is a surgery I could do, but I'm not mentally ready for that kind of commitment to, because it could be successful or I could go completely deaf. But
And it would
it
bring your
can be,
hearing back? If it was
yeah,
successful,
I
you
get
would have full hearing back?
not full hearing. I'd likely still have to wear hearing aids. So that's where I'm like, well, I'm comfortable with my hearing aids. Do I want to take that risk? And also, it can get worse with pregnancy. So until we're done having kids, it's not even really on my plate to even consider.
Hmm.
But my daughter had her hearing tested so far, no signs of it. But if she
Is
does
it a
get it,
genetic
that's
condition?
resources and support for her. Yeah.
Is it genetic? Did you get it from like somebody
Not
in your
not
family?
that we know of. So no one else in my family is aware of it, but it can be mild enough that they might not realize they have it. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, as far as I know, just me.
Are you doing sign language with your daughter at all?
We know a couple words, and I really want to get better at it, but I know it's always going to sound like an excuse, but we know a couple words, but we're not at conversational level yet. It's like your bit. I'm bad
It's
at being dumb. Like it's not just like I'm not
I
there yet.
mean, yeah, it's great to hear like the tinge of guilt in your voice while you explain because I'm the same way. We've learned a few signs and then I keep telling myself I'm gonna learn more because it is so beneficial and like he picks it up so quick when we teach him something, but just haven't learned more words.
Yeah. There was
Yeah.
one other bit you did about going to your son at like 3 in the morning and like seeing the disappointment. And I sent it to my husband and he's like, oh man, that's exactly how I feel. Like I go and now that she knows the word no, I'm watching the camera and she's just like, no, no. And he's like, and so ever since I saw your bit, I'm like, I have to watch the camera because this is too funny. Like it's the immediate disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Why would they want us?
Yeah.
I mean, if even now I'm 38 years old, I love my dad, but I mean, I'm still a mama's boy.
Fair enough.
You
Fair
know,
enough.
yeah, yeah.
Um, do you have any like tips or words of encouragement for parents who have hearing loss of, who might be worried about the additional struggles that come along with it?
Uh, I'm still learning, so it was actually something I didn't even think too much about until in real time I'm experiencing the difficulties that come with it. So I'm still learning as well. I think the advice would be kind of standard across any difficulties is just patience and empathy. Uh, I mean, it's frustrating for anybody who has to deal with somebody who has hearing loss. So, my wife gets frustrated with me, and rightfully so. Like I can't hear her sometimes like 5 times in a row, and I'm like, listen, I know I'd want to punch me in the face right now too. Like I'm sorry, I want to hear this too. I don't want you to have to repeat yourself. And she's very funny, my wife. So sometimes she'll tell a joke, and then by the third time she repeats it, I still laugh, and I'm like, damn, I can only imagine how hard I would have laughed if I heard that on the first time. So I
Well,
apologize that you didn't get to experience the full satisfaction there. But yeah, I think my advice to parents, as somebody who's literally learning in real time, is just um you just be open, like actually take in what's happening. Is your child getting frustrated? Is there some, can you learn sign language? Would that help? That's, do as I say, not as I do, because I just admitted we have not learned sign language. But um yeah, I think patience and understanding and positivity. If your kid knows you love them and all that, then I think you can figure it out.
absolutely. That's a
Yeah.
fair point. That's a good point. Yeah, parenting is hard no matter what. There's its ups and its downs. So, and I mean, I totally feel you on the repeating 5 times and still not hearing it. I had hearing at the beginning of the relationship with my husband, and then I've slowly lost it. So I have so many bad habits where I will yell to him from the other room. I'm like, I don't know why I did that. I'm not going to hear him. And then it just becomes like a battle. And then I
Oh
finally,
yeah. Yeah,
my
when you
bad.
start the conversation from a distance that they won't be able to respond, that's inconsiderate. I do that all the time.
I'm like, my bad. Oh, darn. Oh, too much. So now I have a controversial question, controversial in the hearing loss world.
Mhm.
Do you prefer like hard of hearing or hearing impaired?
I don't care either way.
That's
I
fair.
I unless the former term was like so hurtful, then I see why we have to have a serious conversation about it. But and maybe I'm not getting the nuances of it, but hearing impaired, my hearing is impaired. Like I don't
Right?
understand. Impaired isn't a negative word. It's like it just means I don't know. So for me personally, yeah, I'm just trying to think like would I prefer hard of hearing here? Nah, I could go either way. But if
Like,
somebody says they prefer hard of hearing, that's what I'll call them. I'm not gonna, but in terms of the overall terms, I don't, even like deaf, I never called myself deaf, lowercase d deaf. But I am. I take my hearing aids out. I'm a lot closer to deaf than hearing, that's for sure. So again, I think intent matters and whatever you're saying with the words. If your spirit is in your heart is in the right place, that's all I care about. But uh
that's what
yeah, hard of hearing, hearing impaired, I could go either way. Where do you stand on it?
I prefer hearing impaired because I think it packs more of a punch and people get it right away. If I say hard of hearing, sometimes they're like, what? I'm like hearing impaired. They're like, oh, okay, okay. I just find language
Yeah.
wise, I like to be more direct and just hearing
Yeah.
impaired for whatever reason sticks with people more and they just seem to be more receptive of it. But again, if someone's being like vindictive or saying it meanly, different case.
Well,
Um,
hard of hearing is also, yeah, I think that's the point you were making. It almost sounds, it undersells how deaf you are. Like you might miss the odd word or something. It's like too light for how profound, like the actual term for my hearing loss is profound. Hard of hearing isn't profound enough, you know? And it
I
also
also,
feels a little too tiptoey to me. Like you don't want to say the real thing, which is hearing impaired. It's like I had a joke that I actually did a long time ago, and I never put it on a special or anything because it felt a little too preachy. I try to like not have any messages, or if they're in there, tucked in there in a way that doesn't take away from the funny. But it was just like how we never use that turn of phrase to describe anything else. Like if somebody is broke or poor, you don't say they're hard of money. They're just broke, you know?
It's
But
so true.
yeah, but you can see why I got rid of that bit. It's just like any bit where I could picture me pointing and wagging a finger while I say it, then I like to throw it out. Yeah.
Speaking of your comedy though, do you find it hard to differentiate yourself now being the hearing aid guy that you claim to once not want to be?
What's the question? Differentiate myself like from not being the hearing aid guy, you mean?
Yeah, like
Or
to not do like hearing impaired jokes. But I mean,
I
I think
mean,
they're fantastic. But I'm just meaning like, do you find it hard to steer away from that now?
I haven't gotten the $20 million yet, so I still got some time to be the hearing aid guy. But I just, for me, if a hearing aid joke is funny, then I'll pursue it and try to figure out what I want to write about it. And then if a non-hearing aid joke is funny, I'll do that as well. So I think if I had leaned way harder into the hearing aids, by this point, maybe I could have like a bigger audience and people who know, like they come to me for the hearing aid stuff. But that's never really been my goal. Like I just I love comedy. So sometimes like I'll go do a show and like the last hour I filmed was a lot more about like IVF stuff. My wife and I had to do that to have our son and sometimes like if I'm not talking about my hearing aids at all, and then I see people in the audience have hearing aids, or I'm like, oh, they came for that stuff. So sometimes I feel like a weird sense of like, oh, I should give them what they want. But then my main goal is that I want to do this for the rest of my life. And for me, if I knew I was only talking about hearing aid stuff, I would not have the passion to do that forever.
Right.
But now I got some new hearing aid material that's brewing because it's in relation to my son and there's a new angle there. And it's another thing is I never want it to just be about the hearing aid. I want it to be about the emotional impact that it has, and because that's a universal feeling. Even if you don't wear hearing aids, you can identify with the idea of a father or a parent trying to connect to their son. Uh,
Right.
so yeah, to answer your question, I love wearing hearing aids, and uh I love that people with hearing loss can identify with the things I say, so I would never run away from that. But I am also a full human being, and I want to talk about more than that. But I will say that I have no issue being, even though it was like an ironic thing I said, if I'm the hearing aid guy in people's minds, that's awesome because
Fair.
I'd rather be that than the guy who's like afraid to talk about his hearing aids. There's power in it, and I like that.
Fair enough. Yeah. I find too, like, just with my experience and sharing my story, like comedy also resonates more with people because it's easy to laugh at yourself. Like, like I always think of my stories. Like there was one instance where my friend asked for a Sharpie, but I thought she said a paper shredder, like shredder. So I brought out a full paper shredder to her and she's like, what is this? I'm like, you asked for a shredder. And she's like, no, a Sharpie. And I was like, "Mm, cool, good one." And so I just have learned to laugh at myself and just be okay with that. And a lot of people are like, yes, laughing at yourself helps you process your hearing loss. So
Oh, that's
yeah,
hilarious that you brought a full-on paper shredder.
full on. And she's looking at me like, what? I'm like, oh God. And this was early in my hearing loss too. So I was like, oh no. But before we go, on that note, do you have any words of advice for someone who may be struggling with their hearing loss? Because it can be a lot sometimes, even if we're speaking so positively about it. I'm sure you have bad days too.
Yeah, during the pandemic, I felt the most negativity and anxiety around my hearing loss that I've felt since I was a kid. So it kind of like reinvigorated me on the idea of like not being afraid to speak about my hearing aids or be known as the hearing aid guy because I realized, yeah, this can be an isolating and negative experience. So um, shine any positivity you can on it. So my advice would be whatever the issue is, work your hardest to fix it. Like I know that sounds like, kind of like duh, but like I said, some people know they need hearing aids and they don't get it. And it's like, well, now you're you're more disabled than you need to be. You're hearing worse than you need to be with the tools that are available to you, and you're still going to be down and depressed about your hearing loss. So if there's something you can do to actually help address the problem, then that's the first thing you need to do, as simple as it sounds. And yeah, I just think what we discussed earlier, support system means so much. So if you don't have that organically in your life with family or friends, first of all, if you have family or friends who are making you feel negative about it, then you should probably evaluate those relationships, because you want people who are bringing positivity into your life, and it's a hard enough thing to deal with without having people making you feel some sort of way about it. But if you have nobody, if there's just no support, then I think there's groups out there online in the real world. Maybe you take a sign language class if that's going to connect you to deaf people or get you in that community. But I think the most important thing I've learned over the last few years is how a lot of people with hearing loss, it lead to, well, obviously isolation, loneliness, but even like early onset dementia from people who aren't communicating. So it has real, physiological and psychological impact. So I think whatever you can do to, first of all, improve your hearing any way you can. And second of all, find people who can help support you in that journey, and be a source of positivity. And by the way, that like improve your hearing any way you can. I know there's controversy in the deaf community, and some people, they're like, you shouldn't even wear a hearing aid and you should just embrace being deaf. That's not how I grew up. I didn't grow up in deaf culture. I grew up in hearing. So somebody might give you that advice, and to each their own. But my personal thing is, if there's an opportunity to hear better, why not take it? Actually, I've taken flack before, because like I got asked at a college, and it was like somebody put a video up, but I got asked like, if you could have your hearing, would you have it? And I was like, yeah, obviously, in an instant. And people were like, no, like embrace your deafness, and like people were upset, and it's like, well, yeah, I'm making lemonade out of lemons. I'm fine. Life's great. But yeah, of course I'd like to hear. What are we talking about?
Like, that's a silly question. Like, I mean, if
Yeah.
you don't want it, that's cool, but I want it if I can have it back. Like, why not?
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, my advice would be to try to fix the problem, and you know, problem again. I'm so worried about saying the wrong words here, but you know what I mean. To do whatever you can to give yourself the best fighting chance at actually addressing the health issue, and then finding people who are either going through it, or can help you get through it on your own.
Absolutely. Support groups have been a big part of my journey too. So I think that's a really great point. Um, but yeah, thank you so much for joining me. This has been such a pleasure, and hopefully I get to speak to you again one day, because I love talking to you and hearing about all the things. And anyone watching, go watch one more time, season 1, CBC Gem. Do you know, sorry to put you on the spot, do you know if anyone else in the world can watch it, or is it just Canadians on CBC?
Just Canada. There's illegal ways you can watch it outside of Canada if you have like a VPN or something, but I would never recommend that. Yeah.
Darn, yeah, okay. All right. Well, if that changes, I will let my audience know, but hopefully one day that can change. But thank you again. This
Thank
has
you,
been wonderful.
April. So great to talk to you. Thank you very much.